Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, a creature of pure greed, cruelty, and excess. He's one of the most repulsive villains ever put on screen. But what if I told you he wasn't just science fiction? What if he was a carbon copy of a real Roman emperor? A man so depraved, his story reads like a horror movie? Meet Caligula. By the end of this video, you'll see how Frank Herbert, the author of Dune, didn't just write a story, he wrote a warning. He was a deep student of history, and he understood that history isn't a straight line. It's a circle, a repeating pattern of power, corruption, and collapse. Herbert looked back 2,000 years into the past and found the perfect blueprint for his most monstrous villain. He saw that the systems that allow a man like Baron Harkonnen to exist have appeared before and will appear again. He was handing us a playbook for how every great power rots from the inside out, and it always starts with a monster. First, let's be clear about who the Baron is. In the world of Dune, his evil is absolute. The books tell us that even as a teenager, he enjoyed torturing animals and servants for his own sick pleasure. This wasn't a good man corrupted by power. This was a monster who was handed the keys to an empire. His grotesque, bloated body, so large it needs a network of anti-gravity suspensors to even move, isn't just a physical trait. It's a metaphor for his entire philosophy. His body is a physical manifestation of his corrupt house, swollen with stolen wealth, decadent to the point of immobility, and rotting from within. He turned his homeworld, Gedi Prime, into a polluted industrial hellscape, not for efficiency, but as an expression of his contempt for life itself. His evil is methodical, calculating, and driven by an insatiable hunger for power. Now let's rewind 2,000 years. His name was Gaius Caesar, but history knows him by his childhood nickname, Caligula. When he took the throne at just 24, he played the part of the perfect emperor. For 6 months, he was a populist hero. He cut taxes, freed political prisoners, and threw the biggest parties Rome had ever seen. The city rejoiced. They thought they had a savior. Then the ancient historians, most of whom were senators he terrorized, tell us he contracted a mysterious brain fever. They claim that when he recovered, the good emperor was gone, replaced by a monster. But was it really an illness? Or was that just good propaganda? Many modern historians argue that Caligula wasn't mad at all. They believe his brush with death was simply a catalyst. It burned away his need to pretend to respect the old rules. The mask came off, revealing the tyrant that was always underneath. The Roman writer Seneca, who knew him personally, argued that the cruelty was Caligula's true nature. Absolute power just gave him the opportunity to unleash it. Both of these men understood the fundamental secret of autocratic rule. You don't keep power through respect. You keep it through fear and spectacle. The Harkonnen court was a place of constant paranoia, where, as the lore states, you do not know when someone is planning to assassinate you. The Baron encouraged this, turning his family against each other. It was a perfect mirror of Caligula's paranoid Rome. He brought back treason trials, not for traitors, but to target the wealthiest senators. He'd accuse them of imaginary crimes, have them executed, and legally seize their entire family fortunes. It was a hostile takeover, dressed up as justice, and to distract the masses while they consolidated power. Bred in circuses. If you thought the Rome comparison was a stretch, Frank Herbert explicitly tells us the Harkonnens built massive arenas on Gedi Prime for gladiator matches reminiscent of ancient Rome. They weren't just inspired by Rome's most brutal spectacle. They copied it wholesale. It was a public declaration that power, pain, and entertainment were all the same thing to them. Caligula, of course, was the master of this. He spent fortunes on the games, but his true genius was in psychological spectacle. He famously announced his plan to make his favorite horse, Incitatus, a Roman consul, the highest office in the land. This wasn't madness. It was a calculated, brutal insult to the Senate. He was telling the most powerful men in the world, "You are so pathetic and useless that my horse could do your job. Your traditions are meaningless." That is not insanity. That is the ultimate power move. Every decadent empire is fueled by a machine of exploitation. It needs to consume resources to maintain its grotesque lifestyle. The Harkonnens perfected this. They strip-mined their homeworld into an industrial wasteland, and then they were given the desert planet of Arrakis. They didn't see a world, they saw a commodity. They brutally oppressed the native Fremen, treating them as subhuman, and bled the planet dry of its precious spice, all to amass a fortune that would make them the wealthiest house in the Imperium. This is the exact model Rome used to build its empire. They called it asset stripping. The provinces existed for one reason: to enrich the capital. Rome bled its territories dry. Endless shiploads of grain from Egypt, gold and silver from the mines in Spain, slaves from Gaul, all flowing into the insatiable gut of the city to pay for the games, the armies, and the lavish lifestyles of the elite. Both Harkonnen and Caligula sat atop a system that treated entire populations and planets as entries on a balance sheet, to be squeezed until nothing was left. But here is where the parallel becomes a prophecy. The fatal flaw of every tyrant is hubris, a belief that they are so powerful, so untouchable, that the rules of cause and effect no longer apply to them. Baron Harkonnen wasn't content with destroying his rival's House Atreides. That was just business. The lore reveals his true endgame. He was already plotting to usurp the Padishah Emperor himself, the supreme ruler of the galaxy. He wanted to sit on the Golden Lion throne. He wanted it all. Caligula walked the exact same path of self-destruction. He didn't just terrorize the Senate, he declared himself a living god and demanded they worship him. He broke every Roman tradition, alienated every power base, and treated his own military command with open contempt. He thought he was a god, but he forgot he was still a man. And that is why these empires, built on fear, always eat themselves. The paranoia they create in their subjects eventually infects the very tools they use to maintain power. Caligula's reign of terror ended after less than 4 years. He wasn't overthrown by a foreign army or a popular rebellion. He was cornered in a palace corridor and stabbed 30 times by his own Praetorian Guard, the very elite soldiers paid to protect him. Baron Harkonnen met the same ironic fate. He was killed by Alia Atreides, a child who was not only the sister of his mortal enemy, Paul Atreides, but also his own secret granddaughter, a product of the very Bene Gesserit breeding program he sought to control and exploit. Both men were destroyed by the systems of violence, paranoia, and betrayal they had perfected. The knives they gave to everyone else were eventually turned on them. Frank Herbert wasn't just writing a cool science fiction story. He was holding up a mirror. He was showing us the pattern that repeats throughout all of human history. Empires don't get conquered by foreign armies. They commit suicide. They rot from the head down. They die when their leaders become so decadent, so cruel, and so disconnected from reality that the system they rule turns on itself and consumes them. The first generation builds it through sacrifice. The second generation enjoys it, and the third generation becomes so corrupt and self-absorbed that they burn it all to the ground. We see the echoes of this pattern today, right now. We see leaders who seem to believe the laws don't apply to them. We see a wealth gap growing so vast it would make Roman patricians blush. We see a political world that feels more and more like spectacle, where outrage is more valuable than truth, and cruelty can be repackaged as strength. The question Dune forces us to ask is not if this pattern will repeat. History shows us it always does. The real question is whether we are living inside of it right now, and if we're going to be smart enough to recognize it before the final act.